Welcome to the Warrior Within podcast. From current events, comedy, and entertainment to mental health, hobbies, and the paranormal. You name it, we cover it. Totally raw and unfiltered. So buckle up, strap on your helmet, and let's get ready to rock this mother... And now, here's your host, Chris Borelli, a.k.a. Sibo.
Hello, everybody. I'm insanely excited about this episode. Today we have Drew Linsalata from The Anxious Truth. For those of you that have been listening for a little while, you know about my struggles and with, panic disorder, PTSD, all the nasty stuff that kind of comes along with that. And I've been battling that stuff for almost 2 decades now. I've tried numerous things that, some things work, some things don't. Some things work for some, not for others. There's a gambit of methods and coping mechanisms, and, there's a million things. I found Drew just a few weeks ago, and in just these few weeks, I've been listening to his podcast just about daily, and I have seen tremendous change already in myself. And I actually just posted my success, I call it my mini success story, because the work is not done. I got to continue it. So, Drew, thanks for coming on.
You're very welcome, man. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
That's a great intro, by the way.
Hey, thanks.
I'm digging it. I kind of want to do paranormal now.
Yeah, we do all kinds of stuff. I'm a big UFO nut, too.
I love it.
UFOs and, the parent ghost stuff. Yeah, oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah, we do a lot of stuff for the Warriors, too. Disabled vets. I'm a disabled vet, so I do a lot of advocacy stuff for that, for mental health is a big issue, with our vets. So, and that was one of the other reasons I wanted to have you on today, because I talk to so many people that do deal with these issues. So
it's a big deal. First of all, thank you for your service, and all of you guys that are listening. I do appreciate what you guys do. So
absolutely,
yeah. And yeah, it's a big issue, man. And it's a big issue in your community for sure. These things happen. They're natural outgrowths of some of the experiences that you guys have had. So we can talk about that for sure. But these disorders are way more common than a lot of people think. Even outside of the PTSD or the combat thing or the veteran thing, and tremendous frequency of these anxiety disorders if you look at a large enough population. So you're not alone.
Yeah. And that was one of the biggest things for me. That helps me a lot, is to know that I'm not alone. It's not me. I'm not crazy.
No, you're definitely not crazy, man. This is so far from crazy, by the way. We can talk about that, like what this really is. And it's so far from crazy. I don't like to use the terms like mental illness or disease, because it's not. I don't think it is.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Can you briefly describe, again, I get a lot of newer vets too that I talk to that are experiencing these things. They don't know what it is. They hear me talking about it and they're like, whoa, I have that. What is it? What is it? I've been thinking I'm going crazy. So can you explain a little bit what, and the differences between anxiety and panic disorder and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I can do that. So like anxiety is a thing that all humans experience, right? If you're alive, there are times in your life we're going to feel anxious or afraid or uncomfortable or uncertain or vulnerable. That's just normal. That's part of being alive. When we experience anxiety as just a normal course of life, we discover like, oh, I'm feeling really keyed up about something. I had a fight with my wife, or something will happen at work, or we're going to have money problems or whatever. You understand there's something stressing you and you're having a reaction to it. Sometimes that gets out of control. The reaction gets out of control. So this is where it gets a little bit where people's heads sort of explode when I talk about this stuff. And it can lead to things like panic attacks. And a panic attack these are the things that I'm addressing most of the time: panic disorder, agoraphobia, OCD, those sort of things. So when it bubbles over into panic attack, that is that experience where you are literally launched into the fight or flight response, as if somebody has a loaded weapon pointed in your face, except there's actually no danger at that moment. And we'll talk about some of the ways that dovetails into some of your unique experiences from what you've done in your life. But there's no danger, yet your body reacts that way. And it is terrifying. All the symptoms of a panic attack: your heart is racing, you can't breathe, you're dizzy, your legs get wobbly, all the things that adrenaline does. You have this feeling of impending doom. You must escape. Something horrible is going to happen. top fears are you're going to die, you're going to go crazy, you're going to lose control, you're going to pass out, it's never going to end, you're going to snap. Those are the common things. And people, if they don't know what it is and they've never experienced, first time I ever experienced it, I thought, well, this is what it feels like to die.
Yep.
I had no idea. I never heard the word panic attack before. You can become derealized. Everything feels unreal, like you're outside of yourself. You don't recognize yourself. The world looks strange. All of those things, super common. That's what it feels like. And what winds up happening is that's a shitty experience. Like nobody wants to have that experience. And as humans, we're programmed to not want to repeat negative experiences. And so unfortunately, for some percentage of us, our brains decide that should never happen again. That was real danger. And then we start to worry about it happening again. We don't want it to happen again. And then we start to take precautions to try and keep it from happening again. And then we look for all kinds of ways to stop it when it does happen. And and we begin to engineer a life that's designed to never let that happen. And that's how things progress to things like agoraphobia, where you stop going certain places, you stop doing certain things, you won't talk to certain people, quit your job, get out of school, you won't leave the house. Yeah, we could talk about all of this. That's what this is. It's not, you're not crazy. There's a word for it if you're having this.
I can tell you that, and I'm a lot like you. I read your story, that I've had my ups and downs with it.
Yeah.
I've had my my periods where I feel, free as a bird, and I can drive from Virginia to Florida, no problem. Yeah. And then I have my issue, when I call it a flare up. For me, it seems to happen for months at a time until I work on it to get over it. But it's been, for me, it's been really bad just this past year. Obviously, there's a lot going on in the world, and who knows what the root of it is. But listening to your podcast, I came to the realization: who cares what the root is? That's not the problem. The root is not the problem.
Yeah, that's controversial, especially if you're coming from a traumatic background and there's some PTSD, especially if service related.
Sure.
That's controversial when we say that, but it's kind of true. So I talk about it this way. When there's panic attacks and then there's panic disorder. Panic attacks do not necessarily mean panic disorder. Mm-hmm. So the disordered form of the anxiety is what happens, or what you would call it, when you begin to modify your lifestyle to keep it from happening because you're afraid of the anxiety itself. So if there was a root cause, and sometimes there is, and sometimes we never find out what it is. I will never know. I'm never going to know what triggered me into panic. I don't know. Yep. But what if there was a root cause, or there is a root cause? Once you become afraid of the anxiety itself, the presence of anxiety itself is now the driver of more anxiety, and you have decoupled the anxiety from the root cause. So people who spend a lot of time, who have these disorders like panic disorder or agoraphobia, may spend a lot of time digging for root cause, and then they have epiphany after epiphany about their background or their relationships, their childhood, whatever, yet they can't seem to overcome. Why can't I drive to the supermarket? I don't understand this. I know what it is now, but it's two different problems can begin to happen. You had a problem, possibly. Now you have another problem. So we have to solve both the problems, not just one.
Exactly. Yeah.
The
downfall, it's the circle of thought that just creates the issue. I can tell you my panic disorder turned into agoraphobia, and I can tell you exactly when.
Yep.
My wife and I was a passenger in the car. We're driving just to the store, maybe 3 miles away, coming back, and I was started to panic in the car in the passenger seat. And I was, that fight or flight kicked in. My thoughts, that circle of thought just started, triggering. And, I was like, oh my God, I got to get out of here. I looked up, I saw a red light coming up. So I was like, my immediate instinct, as silly as it is, was to reach for her handbrake. And she slapped me before I could get it. Thank God.
Okay.
And
good job.
I reached for the door handle. We're still moving. And same thing. She's slapping me. I got my seatbelt. I don't know where I'm going, Yeah. So that triggered then these thoughts from there that, when we got home, I was safe and everything. So my thoughts went to, okay, this has become not only a problem for me, but if I did something like that, I could hurt somebody else. Mm. And then it started that thought, and then I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to, so yeah.
For some people, that progression, panic disorder left unchecked, often becomes agoraphobia. And agoraphobia, people have the misconception it just means won't go out of the house, or the most common, like widely known definition is a fear of open spaces.
Yeah.
But agoraphobia is really like avoidance to the max. It's I won't go to certain places. I won't do certain things because I'm afraid I'll panic or feel anxiety when I do those things. So what winds up happening when you're in that situation, and it progresses slowly with like a lot of little sneaky modifications and accommodations. I just won't eat this food. I just won't drink anymore. I just won't go to work on Saturdays. Or like you, boom, it can happen almost instantly. A week after that first panic attack, boom, you're agoraphobic. It's crazy the way it happens.
Yeah.
I want to bring up one thing that you talked about, though, the thoughts and the irrational nature of what anxiety and panic will do, the disordered anxiety and panic. You can jump out of the car while you're moving, going to pull the handbrake. You would never think to do that.
No.
Right. And you probably wouldn't have, but you just start to think things that the person who is not in a state of disordered anxiety, like your wife, can sympathize with the fact that you are crippled by some of these thoughts, but she knows they're not real.
Right.
Yeah. But the issue is we can never convince ourselves that the thoughts are not real. We can when right now, you and I are sitting calmly and full well, like I'm fine.
Sure.
Yep. Shit hits the fan, that all goes out the window. We have to approach it a different way. Yeah.
Exactly.
Way to do this. Yep.
Yep. And so the way you approach things really is, it's tough love, man, but it's what we need. It's a good thing. So I listened to your first few episodes and I was like, yep, he's right. And then there was, I can't remember what episode number it is, but you talk about, almost the burden that we put on other people, that we expect to be there for us, to take care of us, to help us through this. And that sort of hit home for me. I was like, wow, that sucks to hear that, but you know what? He's right. He really is right. And I think about, all the things my wife sacrifices because I can't go places, and, and it's like, wow, you know what? I really need to, I gotta get out of this. I gotta work on this.
Yeah.
So that hit home. Yeah, that really hit home.
It's hard. I mean, and I'll tell you that the stuff that I talk about in the podcast, I didn't invent any of that. This is not new, right? So I'm just working on the tenets of cognitive behavioral therapy and those approaches to these disorders. And we have decades of clinical evidence that shows these are the most effective way to treat these things. But it's not super popular because many times you're right. You will hear there's nothing. And look, and this is, if you were working with a good therapist, you would hear stuff like this too. So, if you sat in front of a therapist who was trained to specifically treat anxiety disorders and wanted to talk about how scary it is when you feel dizzy, a good therapist would shut you down and say, you're not dizzy, time to move on. We're not allowed to talk about that anymore. We need to talk about how to approach it, how to go at that, how to unlearn that fear.
Right.
And we have to call out the anxiety disorders are incredibly selfish. You're not, the disorder is. So it will scream constantly for accommodation, for validation, for soothing, for reassurance, and no amount is ever enough, ever. Yeah. So when we try to treat it that way, you're just digging a deeper hole. So it's hard to hear, but the way out of it is not the way you want it to be.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a hard road out. It's not an easy road out.
Yep.
Yeah.
And people want to avoid the panic, but the truth is you really have to experience the panic to get over the panic.
You do. Like the bad news here is the most effective way to solve these problems is to essentially do the opposite of everything you have been doing to try to solve the problem. So the natural tendency of human beings, we're creatures of comfort. We're the creatures of path of least. I don't care who you are. The toughest mofo on the planet is wired from the factory to take the shortest way home. And you could, all due respect to all David Goggins and the gurus, he had to learn to be that way. He wired that way, right? He had to go through a transformation to kind of learn a new way to approach his obstacles. And this is what we have to do. So it seems like common sense to try and soothe the fear, to seek reassurance. Please tell me again that I'm not having a heart attack. Please tell me again that I'm not going crazy. Yeah. It's never enough. So we have to actually take everything we were doing and throw away all the searches for what I eat, what I drink, what I swallow, what I sniff, what I rub my body. Throw away all of that stuff. Throw away all the things that we think are soothing us and accommodating us. Drop it all. Call out, in so many words, call out the bullshit of the irrational fear and start to go toward it. Nobody likes to talk about that. It's a hard sell sometimes.
No. Yeah, you're like, oh.
I know. Nobody wants to hear it. And I believe me, I catch a lot of I have a big podcast, but imagine if I was saying nice, fluffy things, it would be 10 times the size. I people who hear what I say and like they hate me. They will not, they don't want to listen to another episode, and they'll tell me you clearly never had this problem, which you read my book. You know that I did. And they don't understand. Like, this is crazy. What do you mean I'm supposed to intentionally go into scary situations? That's crazy. You don't know what you're talking about. All right.
Okay. Yeah. That's the way.
Yeah,
that's the way. It'll undo itself after once you're doing it enough, and you're another thing you had mentioned at one point was that a lot of people do exposure therapy wrong, and I will tell you again, I have a personal experience with that, and you are 100% correct.
Yep.
So probably a little more than a decade ago, I have a bunch of phobias. One of my phobias is flying. Another phobia is bridges.
Okay.
So what I did was, well, let's do the most intense exposure possible. So I hopped on a plane, I flew to San Francisco, and I drove back and forth across the Golden Gate Bridge over and over and over. And then I flew back home.
Yeah.
And it did absolutely nothing for me.
Yes.
Because in those moments of panic, all I want to do is race to the other side and get to the other side and get out of this. Okay, I experienced it.
Right.
But that doesn't work.
It doesn't work. I mean, so first of all, we need to acknowledge, yes, I said call out the bullshit and go towards the fear. That's a 50,000 foot view. It's more complicated than that. Really, it is. So you can't just decide one day, I'm going to run this shit over. And my guess is that a lot of people who are listening in your audience are wired that way. Fuck this, I'm going to run. I'm sorry. It's not family friendly.
No, you're good.
You have to bleep me out. But I'm done with this. I'm going to run this shit over. And they decide to do like what you did. Now, what you're talking about, fear of bridges, fear of flying, those are called simple phobias because there's a specific fear. I'm afraid of flying. I'm afraid to go over the bridge. Okay. So you had the right idea, but what you did was called flooding, and we never want to do that. So you can't decide that if you are agoraphobic and having a hard time going more than 3 miles from your house, that one day you're going to get in the car and drive to Nebraska by yourself.
Right.
And that's going to fix it. It won't. Very, very, very rarely does that work. It's a flooding situation. It's a bad experience, right? So that you would almost, my guess is that was damn near traumatic for you.
So traumatic, I think it was the last time I flew.
Yes, because so there's a reason why we do it. So and a lot of people here like, oh, I have to do exposure therapy. I actually just wrote an article that appeared on The Mighty, which is a big health and mental health website, about how exposure therapy doesn't have to be as scary as you think, but people think that it means I just have to go do the scariest stuff and hang on and push through and power. And we use language like that. I'm going to power through and I'm going to run it over. I'm a warrior. I will not lose. When really and truly we want to do it in little tiny baby steps, take an increment. And trust me, when you do it that way, you're in for a bit of an ass kicking. It is not an easy thing to do, baby steps at all. We take little steps incrementally, consistently, with tenacious. You have to be tenacious about doing it, and you have to surrender to the worst thing that happens. You don't power through. You actually win this battle when you put down your sword, as crazy as that sounds.
Yeah. No, it makes sense.
Yeah, but that's really what it is. Yeah.
Powering through is basically just feeding that fight or flight. You're allowing yourself to, you're getting through it, but you're still fleeing from the experience.
And you're teaching your brain the lesson that your brain, the fear center, your lizard brain, amygdala, whatever you want to call it, has learned is I will now link those sensations to danger. I call those danger. And your brain is doing what it thinks it's supposed to do. It's doing its job. It thinks it's keeping you safe. So when you power through, you white knuckle, or you just grit and endure your way through it, the story I guarantee you tell yourself afterward is, I made it. I made it again. I made it again. I made it is never it. I did it because what you really after is I was terrified. I did nothing to stop myself from being terrified. I did nothing to run it over, did nothing to save myself, and I still wound up okay. And we do that incrementally in small steps, consistently over time, repetition. And then your lizard brain says, oh, over time it gets it. And it says, oh, I was been wrong all this time. Sorry, dude. And then you start to not be afraid of the anxiety. That's what this is all about. And that's how we solve these problems. But you got to do it the right way or it doesn't work. Yeah.
Yeah. What was different for me this past time when I did my little trip to Kohl's was...
That's a great picture, by the way. That was awesome. You guys look like you're thrilled.
What was different is that I told my wife can tell when I go into the panic mode. So she was, will try coaching me. And she was, doing that, feel your feet on the floor, touch feel the steering wheel. And I was like, nope, nope, nope. I said, I just got to be in it. Just let it be. And rather than tensing up, I literally pushed myself back in the seat, loosened up my grip on the steering wheel, and just said to myself, just be in it. Just be in it. And everything just kind of trickled away. And then I was smiling, and I was like, wow, look where I am right now. Like, I'm so far from home. I remember I kept saying that. Like, this is awesome. So,
when you do it that way for the first time and you truly surrender. And I know, look, I don't like the word surrender either. It has all kinds of negative connotations. I don't like the idea either. I'm not wired for that, but I had to accept that this was the way I have to do it. Like, you're standing there, and in your mind, the biggest, baddest guy on the planet is brass knuckles and is about to take you out right here, right on the button. And you got to let him do it. Only then you learn that he wasn't really there. You only thought he was, but you're ready. Like, okay, go ahead and do it. And you're terrified because he's going to shatter your nose, but then it doesn't happen. And then it doesn't happen again and again and again and again.
Yeah.
And then the lessons start to learn and everything starts to change. So what you did was perfect, man. But let me address for a second two things. Number one, that feel your feet on the floor. Like, that's okay. We use some of those techniques as part of the surrender process, or a surrender technique, if you will. But they're often taught as distraction techniques. Well, count the blue things. Tell me what you can smell. You're trying to run from it. And so what people wind up doing is they build this crazy empire of coping and mechanisms. I'll be okay as long as I can count blue things, or as long as I can taste a mint, or as long as I can snap a rubber band, or I have to be grounded. Yep. All you did was learn a new way to save yourself from a thing you never have to be saved from. So it doesn't really work out that well. And your wife also, let's address that for a second. She loves you and she doesn't want you to be in distress. So it's natural for our loved ones to want to soothe us and bring us down. But what you did was exactly right. Like, nope, just let me. I'm going to have to take this on the chin. Let me do it. It's okay. Yeah. And that ended faster than it usually would have, right?
I couldn't believe it. And I was so excited when it did.
You look so happy in the picture, man. It was a great shot. Loved it.
But I was sure to reinforce myself, even in the moment, that, okay, this is awesome, but let's not celebrate it going away. Let's not celebrate that. Let's just, this is a normal thing. Just act as if, this is normal. So what? Right. It happened. It went away. It's going to happen again, I'm sure. And just let it be. Just let it happen. So, the hardest.
Where you want to get is that, like, it might happen again. It may never happen again. Odds are it will. But as you get better and better at this and you go down the road to recovery, it does happen less and less. And for some people, it never happens again. That's possible. Yeah. I don't know anybody more recovered than me. And it's possible that I can have a panic attack maybe once or twice a year. It can happen. Yeah. Except for me, I treat it as an annoyance. It's my very first episode of the podcast I ever did. I explained that a panic attack is a discrete event. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and then it's over. So for me, it's like here's 15 minutes of my life I ain't getting back. And it rushes through me. Adrenaline does what it does, and then it's over, and I'm annoyed that it happened. And you're a little shaky after, but then I move on with my day. I don't think about it ever again. If it happens again, all right. If it doesn't happen again, whatever. Either way, that's where you get that. So good. Your mindset was good there.
Thank you. Can you tell us a little bit about your story?
Yeah, sure.
How it all happened for you?
Yeah. So, I'm old. So my first panic attack, I'm not that old.
I was going to say you're not that old.
Older. But my first panic attack happened in 1986. I was 19 years old, almost 20 years old. I was home from school. I went to school in Buffalo, New York, and I went to college in Buffalo, and I was back home in New York on Long Island for spring break. Actually, I was just hanging out in the house I grew up in. Like, is there a safer place in the world? I mean, at least for me. I was just chilling. I was reading. I was listening to music. It was 11:30 at night, and boom, I had my first panic attack. No idea what it was. Terrifying. I will remember that night till they put me in a box. Terrifying experience. Thought for sure I was dying. I did the old panic roller coaster. It happened. It waned. It happened because I kept feeding it. And that led me right down the road to developing panic disorder. Boom. Instantly, I was afraid of it happening again. That's the disorder. I started to modify my life to keep it from happening. I started to become agoraphobic. That was in 86. I read a book by an Australian doctor named Claire Weekes. So if you guys are watching, Claire Weekes, Weekes, she wrote a book called Hope and Help for Your Nerves. I was given that book by a psychologist in 1986. So I had a really hard 6 or 8 months where I became kind of damn near agoraphobic. He gave me the book. I read the book. I was like, oh, that's what this is. And boom, I kind of got over it. because knowing was enough then.
Yeah.
But I kind of didn't. And then it came back again, like 10 years later. I get anxious now and then, but I forgot everything that I read in the book, and I hadn't really done the work the first time. So 10 years later, it happened again. I started reacting to it in the old ways, try and stop it, try and avoid it. I became crippled with panic disorder. I would then truly became agoraphobic. Couldn't even go to I owned the business and I couldn't go to my own office. Frozen in fear in my own bathroom. Terrible. Just, I wouldn't wish it on my most enemy. And then clinical depression set in. So that was rough. That time I solved it with medication, which is a controversial topic that I don't hide my anti-medication bias, but I don't talk about it either because it's a hard topic for people to discuss without getting emotional. I solved it with medication. I thought it was the best thing ever invented in 2006. I'm sorry, in 1996. And then it wasn't, because I lost all of my emotions, made terrible decisions. It literally turned me into a different person. I didn't have any panic, which was great. Wasn't depressed. That was great, but I had nothing. I gained 100 pounds. I was 100 pounds heavier than I am now, like on that medication. It was not a good thing. It kind of destroyed my business, my finances. I practically lost my family. I lost grandparents, and people close to me never shed a tear. It was not natural,
Yeah.
I came off the meds, struggled really hard with the withdrawal process from those. It was an antidepressant, by the way. I wasn't taking a benzo. I was taking an antidepressant. Struggled really hard with that. But then I got over that, which was great. It taught me a lot of lessons. I'd go through that process again, as hard as it was, because it taught me a lot. But then, a year and a half, 2 years later, it's like, well, wait a minute. Those meds didn't solve a problem. I still have panic disorder and agoraphobia. I went right down the road again. But this time I said, okay, that's it. I got to do the real thing here. And I did.
Yep.
And I did the exposure work, and I worked hard for 6-8 months, and I did it all. And that was when I really solved the problem. So, by 2009 or so, I was probably 80% done. And, it's hard to sometimes do less 10%, 5%, because you have no reason to fly every day and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And that's it. That was my story. 20 something, 30 years of my life, on and off.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
that's pretty off and on. The past 10 years, it's been mostly on, but it comes in waves, and it sucks when it does. But hey, I'm learning to, I don't know. It's funny because, as young adults, we get excited about fear. We go jump on a roller coaster. I tried to get myself into this mentality. It didn't work for me, but I tried it. It's like, what? When I panic, I should get excited. Like, it's a free roller coaster, but it didn't work.
It doesn't work. And man, I've heard all of those things. Believe me, I deal with thousands of people who have this problem now. It's a privilege that I get to talk to people and try and help them, honestly. And I've heard all the stories, and I've heard that too. Hey, this is the same, and it is from a physiological standpoint. It's the same exact thing you experience if somebody told you won the lottery, or if you're on a roller coaster, or your favorite team just won the Super Bowl, or you're having sex with your wife. Like, same things, and those are all good things. And people say, like, just imagine that you're like on a roller coaster. Just imagine that you're climbing a mountain, and like, it doesn't work. And then you get frustrated because people will tell you, just think positive, go to your happy place. I've heard of them all of it. And then people get super frustrated, like, something must be really wrong with me because this isn't working at all.
Yeah.
And it's just because they had the bad advice.
Yeah.
Popular advice, just not good advice.
I've tried so many techniques, and for the longest time, I was like the Candy Crush king in the car.
Yes. The funny thing about distraction, man, is that distraction works. Like, you'll notice that if you could bury yourself in Candy Crush.
Oh yeah.
I haven't been thinking about my anxiety for 15 minutes. Except it's not lasting. That's the only problem. You can't build a life of distraction. So, but it's proof that says if I get out of my own head, suddenly I feel safe again. So there you go.
Yeah. And one of my old therapists actually told me that when you do sometimes these coping mechanisms, that can almost lead to OCD, because then you start that train of thought that, okay, well, if I didn't wear my blue shirt today, I'm going to panic. You start to get weird thoughts like that because, you get so used to those certain coping mechanisms and dialing into what was I doing when I panicked, or, man, I did this and I didn't panic today. So what was I wearing? What did I eat? Blah, blah, blah. So
yeah. It's not necessarily accurate to say you can develop OCD. So I just want to clarify that you can develop very strongly engaged ritualistic behaviors. That isn't necessarily OCD, but I get that. I remember once I ate Chinese food and I had a panic attack like 20 minutes later. That's it. I didn't eat an egg roll for like 6 years, which was stupid because it had nothing to do with it. but your
Sure.
brain becomes, our brains are great connection machines already. We're really good at making connections. It goes into overdrive when we make ridiculous connections when they aren't even really there. You're right. And I worked with people who have literally gotten to the point where they can eat only 5 things. They must use only all natural organic toothpaste and shampoo. And like they're convinced that this is how I must live. And then you start to dismantle those irrational assumptions, face the fear, and they discover like, oh, the toothpaste had nothing to do with it. Wow, who knew?
Yeah. I was that guy at one point too. I literally, and then this was probably about 5 or 6 years ago when I was going through a really bad phase with it, and I was convinced there was a certain shampoo I had to use every day, and if I didn't use that shampoo, I was going to panic that day, and I wasn't going to be able to make it to work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an exhausting way to live, isn't it?
Oh, like, absolutely. Yeah.
Because then you're juggling details that no one normally juggles at all.
Exactly.
The house, I have to leave the house with my water. I have to have my mints. I have to have my Xanax. I have to have this. I have that. Like can only go to these places. I have to make sure these people are here. There was a time when I was in, I would used to run out. Like, so, work is like 9 to 5, whatever. And like at 5 o'clock, I would start to freak the F out because like, I got to make sure I get the hell out of here. Cause otherwise I could wind up as the only person in the office and we can't have that. Can't be alone in the office. Like, so like all these crazy rituals that you develop. I will admit to another one. There was time early on back in the 90s when I developed an irrational fear, because this happens too. A lot of times we do develop irrational fears or obsessive intrusive thoughts that, products could be tampered with. And I would let my wife drink out of the orange juice first.
Yep.
Like, what kind of a monster am I? Like I'm supposed to throw myself on the grenade for her. And I would be like, I'm not going to open that until she does. Like how crazy, but it felt real to me.
Yep.
Yeah. And at the time I would say to myself, like, this is insane. If that really is poisoned orange juice, you should drink it, you moron. Save her. But it doesn't matter. You cannot reason. That part of our brain that controls these functions is not listening. It doesn't know words. So,
exactly. I know that I was at the point where I was just reading ingredients on everything.
Sure.
And I can't remember. There was something I was trying. I want to say a lotion or something I was using, and I was looking at the ingredients, and there was something I didn't recognize, and I was like, "Oh my god, what if that makes me like feel high or feel stoned?" And then I have to think to myself, "Well, I guess if it did that, every kid in America would probably be buying this product." But yeah, just totally irrational thoughts. It's ridiculous.
And that, but you just can't. It's hard to go against that fear. The fear, look, in all these situations, I'm never saying that the fear is false. It's a rational fear because there's no actual basis underneath it, but the fear is real. That is absolutely as real as any fear. It is real. So it's hard because you're going again. Every part of us is programmed to react, to run from fear, to fight during fear. And we're saying you got to do the opposite. That's hard to do.
Yeah.
It's hard to do.
Very.
We should talk a little bit about the PTSD thing, though, because I never want to have this conversation in that audience without addressing that.
Sure.
So sometimes people always say, well, what about that? I have PTSD. That means I can't get past my anxiety disorder. Sometimes, first of all, PTSD is not a disorder itself. It's a collection of behaviors and symptoms that grow out of traumatic background, right? So we know. Sometimes what happens is people who have been through trauma, whether it's service-related, combat-related, whatever it happens to be, or abuse or emotional abuse, whatever it is, can the trauma teaches us things sometimes that will teach us that we are truly unsafe. So sometimes you're in a situation where you're kind of it's hard to say, well, I'm just going to surrender to anxiety because you're so conditioned to stay safe because of what you have been through that can add a wrinkle to it. Sometimes the trauma will teach us things like I can never be unsafe no matter what I do, or I'm not strong enough. If you've been emotionally abused or in that sort of manipulative relationship kind of thing, whether it's parents or partners, whatever, I'm not strong enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm never going to be able to get better. I'm not worthy of being better because I'm not a good person. So there's a lot of wrinkle that those traumatic experiences add. And it's important to recognize them and know that they do add differences in the way we approach this. Sometimes the approach is the same, but you can't just dive in and say, well, I'm going to do all my exposure and face my fear and without also addressing some of those issues, either at the same time, afterwards, whatever. You got to do it all. So I have to acknowledge that. I can't tell somebody with especially combat related PTSD, like, yeah, just go do scary things. That wouldn't be fair for me to do. You got to do it all, got to address it all. So But the mechanisms that we learned and the things we learn when we treat our anxiety disorders do go hand in hand, where you can learn to experience those traumatic memories without hitting the panic button, because I can learn to emotionally regulate. I know it's a terrible memory that I have to process, but I'm not there now. I'm here now and I'm safe. So there's a lot of dovetailing, but you have to address all of that.
Yes.
Yeah. Wouldn't be fair to say otherwise.
I think it's also important to note, especially from the vets. I talk to so many vets. Trauma is subjective as well. How do I say that? So I know a lot of vets that get on other vets' cases because they are collecting disability for PTSD, but they never saw combat. And it's important for people to understand that trauma is subjective. You don't have to see combat. There are a million things that could be traumatic, especially, you have a lot of females in the military that experience MST, sexual trauma, that kind of thing. As a child, getting lost in a grocery store could be a traumatic event. Trauma is subjective.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's a good point, man, because I think especially, if you are a vet and you've done your service and maybe you didn't see active combat, but you wind up with PTSD, for all you know, that person has lived experiences before they ever put a uniform on.
Sure.
Now they are dealing with now. It may have nothing to do with the fact that they were in the service or their service experience, or it could just be, experiences they had while in the service were just a long line of traumatic experiences they've had. So you're right. It's kind of not fair to just say that only combat, only people who have seen active duty, only law enforcement, only EMTs. No, many people can have traumatic backgrounds and they express in a lot of the same ways, even though the experiences can be different. So you never know what's in someone's head. You never know.
Yeah. We all perceive the world a little bit differently. So
we do. And the trauma threshold too is different for a lot of people. But some people just have a higher tolerance and they would never consider what they went through a traumatic experience, even though maybe it is coloring their thoughts and behaviors now, and other people have a little lower tolerance. And what you would think, like, how could you call that trauma? It's not fair. They do. They just, that's just the way it is for them, So, yeah. Good topics.
Yeah. So what are you working on now? Do you still, so I'm catching up on, I started episode 1 of the podcast.
Yeah, there are 6 years worth. You got a lot of listening.
I was going to say, I'm like in the 30s right now.
Yeah, so I think we do 151 this week or 140.
I was just going to say, are you still doing them actively? So
I am. I publish one every week now. So, yeah. So you'll never catch up if you listen to one a week.
I was just going to say, you need to stop so I can catch up and then, okay, you're good.
Yeah. I publish a podcast every week. Today, in fact, in a couple hours, I'm going to interview a very well-known psychologist named Dr. Sally Winston, who also works with a psychologist named Dr. Marty Seif. And I had Dr. Seif on a couple of years ago, or a year ago. So we talked about intrusive and obsessive thoughts. They kind of specialize in that stuff. So I'm going to interview her. So I talk about the techniques I teach. I, cover different topics in recovery. I have guests on. I talk to people who are success stories. So the podcast, every week there's a new one. Some weeks we skip if there are other projects going on. But I'm podcasting all the time. I have the social media stuff and the books and all that stuff.
You are a warrior, man. I'm before you came on here, I'm like, this guy's got to be so tired of talking about this stuff. But every day you are active in the social media groups. I watch it every single day. You are just answering questions. I love it. You're doing awesome stuff. I love it.
Well, I'm glad you find it helpful, man. I do. You know what? In the end, I learn something every day. So it's not just me like pontificating, the things I learned 10 years ago. Like every day you guys teach me something new, a new wrinkle, something else I should look at, another expert I should bring on to talk about certain things. So it's a great experience. I get to meet a ton of great people and I watch them change their lives. So like, who wouldn't want to do that? I'm a lucky dude that I get to do that,
Yeah.
So it's great.
Yeah. I was just listening to some of the episodes with Holly.
Right.
And those are really good. Is it Cuts?
Cuts. It's Holly Jazz.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's great.
So those are great. And I love the success story episodes. I have another one that's going to come out soon. So those are real people who went through what I went through, what you're going through now, came out the other side and took the time to share their stories. So people love those too. And it's great, man. So I never thought it would turn into what it has, but I'm digging the ride. So I'll keep going.
I think it's really important for people to hear those success stories.
Yeah. Yeah, there's inspiration there, you know.
Yep, that's why I went running to looking for Facebook groups that deal with this kind of thing, because I wanted to hear, I didn't want to hear somebody else's what they're dealing with. That sort of helps too, but I wanted to hear some people that made it through, so.
I think one of the things I'm most proud of in terms of the community that surrounds the podcast, especially the Facebook group that you're in, is I'm super proud of that group, because there's a zillion anxiety message boards and Facebook groups, and I don't know a one that looks like our group. Like, you guys make it so special, because it's more than just, does anybody else, this is horrible, no one understands, I'm so afraid, someone talk me down. Look, I understand we all need that sometimes. That's part of it. But every day, people are encouraging each other, inspiring each other. They're actually making progress. I mean, how many times a day do you see somebody say, oh my God, I did a thing that I haven't done in 2 years. I'm so psyched. And everybody will cheer for them and like, do it again. Or when someone's struggling, they come in and ask a question. Did I do this wrong? What could I have done better? It's somebody, please help me because I'm feeling down right now. And a little pep talk. And like, you guys are amazing. Like, I just love you guys so much. It's just a privilege to watch that dynamic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
that's pretty awesome. I know my little success story is like gotten almost 400 likes now. And I was like, oh my God, I think that's the most liked anything I've ever posted in my life.
Yeah.
That's incredible. That's so cool.
It's super engaged. There's 5,500 people in there right now. And like, our level of engagement is super high. And like, honestly, I don't do anything. It just sort of, people show up on the podcast or my books or whatever it is, but like, people just show up and then they listen for a little while. Like, oh, this is a strange sounding place. I haven't seen one like this before. And neither they run because they're not ready for that approach, which is okay. And then sometimes they come back, or they learn and then they jump in. And that's great, man. So it's a privilege to be able to be involved with you guys. That's love it.
Can we brush real quickly on depersonalization, derealization? I know that for me, that was the scariest part of the entire experience. Yeah. Feeling like you're not really there, like you're in a dream that, and that just triggers irrational thoughts. Maybe I'm going to hurt myself. Maybe I'm going to hurt somebody else, Yeah.
Yeah. Depersonalization and derealization are states of what's called dissociation. And there's a zillion reasons why people go into dissociative states, right? In this case, we're addressing it as an anxiety symptom. Mm-hmm. You can talk about subconscious protection. It's a way to protect yourself from repressed memories. Yeah, we could go down that road. But really, in this situation, it's an anxiety symptom, just like a racing heart or being hard to breathe or feeling dizzy or jelly legs. It's the same. It's just another anxiety symptom, right? So it's super hard to describe it. If you've never felt it, there are really hard. It's hard to put words that will tell you what it is. It's depersonalization is when you suddenly become hyper aware of yourself. And like aware to a point that you normally are not. So now it doesn't feel right. You normally don't perceive yourself in your environment. I'm in it, but I'm not perceiving myself in the environment. This is the way I frame it anyway. Yeah. And then you become hyper aware of yourself and you start to question, like, this is what my hand looks like? Is this real? You look in the mirror, you're just not right. Like, you start to question your own existence. Am I real? Am I in control? Am I actually moving? Wait, and look, I had a lot of depersonalization when I was driving, and I would like frantically try and count the bumps on the steering wheel, like just to make sure that I was still feeling the wheel and all that stuff. Derealization is when the world outside of you starts to feel unreal, or you're detached from it. I like to think of it like in guitars, in musical terms. So, you're there's a beat and that the band is playing on, and you're like a quarter step off. You're 16th note off from the rest of the band, and you can't catch up, and it's not right, and it doesn't sound right, and they're very disturbing sensations, but they're not dangerous.
Right.
That's the biggest thing. And it's one of the hardest symptoms for people to just surrender to. And the harder you try to claw back to reality, the worse it gets sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had to come to the conclusion that I guess I'm just going to be derealized right now while I drive down the Long Island Expressway. Oh, well, that wasn't easy to do that, but let go. It's like, all right, this is just how I feel right now. That's all. And it starts to go away. So
the thought I that always circles my brain when I have those experiences and those sensations is, oh my God, I'm gonna be stuck like this. And that's
one of the most common fears.
Yeah. But then you realize, well, I've felt like this 740 times this year, so I'm probably not gonna get stuck like this.
Look, our brains are amazing, right? They really are. Like, it's a miracle of engineering. Like, I don't think anything like it exists in the universe that we're aware of yet, but they also suck in so many ways, like so many flaws, and there really needs to be a 2.0 if possible. So, I think you're right. It doesn't matter that you felt derealized 797 times. And the 798th time, it's like the first time, and you're just going to keep believing all the irrational fear about it. So people fear that they will be stuck that way. They will never go away. Or they fear that they are out of control and they'll do something that they normally wouldn't do. Or they fear that they're not real. And it starts to bring up crazy existential obsessions. Like, is life even real? Or that leads us into like, what's the point of all this? So, and an anxious mind will grab those and chew on them and churn them. And it can be a little bit torturous in a way.
Yeah.
So part of what we talk about is learning how to like not follow every thought you have. You're not required to honor, follow, answer, and engage in dialogue with every thought you have. You're not required.
Yeah.
Hard thing for people to understand too, but that's the way we approach those things. So
I had one therapist that told me something that always stuck with me, and he said, "Feelings are not facts."
Yeah.
So just because you're feeling it, that it doesn't mean that's real. It's just it's a passing thought. Don't grab onto it. Let it pass right on through.
Right.
And
the example I always give is because people will say, they'll argue with me, and I understand. Frightened people will argue, and they're like, "Yeah, but it feels like I'm going crazy." And I'll usually end that conversation with, "It feels like there's $10 million in cash under my desk right now. It feels so much like there is. If I told you that I gave away my house, emptied my bank accounts, and gave my business away for nothing because I know there's $10 million under there, you would think I was effing crazy, right?"
Yeah.
So we never act in disordered anxiety. We never care. I'm sort of famous for, I don't give a F how you feel. Like, and I don't mean that emotionally. Like, I wouldn't tell a crying person to go away from me, but like when you're dealing with panic and agoraphobia and a disordered anxiety, I don't care how you feel is actually a compassionate thing to tell somebody.
Yeah.
As crazy as that sounds, like,
it's true.
It doesn't matter because how you feel has never mattered. Never.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You need to get people to realize that, and that's sometimes you got to tell them the hard way. But you're right. Yeah. That's what I needed.
Yeah.
And
you're ready. You have to be ready to hear that.
Yes.
And that's okay. Some people are not ready yet. That's okay. It's not a crime. But it is hard to hear that. So I've been like, it's when I will say things like, "It's never about how you feel. It's never about how you feel." Sure. That's wrong. That's crazy. It's dehumanizing. You're taking away my soul, my human. No, what I mean is like your feelings, or I'll say things like, I just did a whole episode called "Why It's Not Okay to Trust Your Gut." Stop trusting your gut. When you're in a state of disordered anxiety, intuition, gut feeling, gut, instinct, out the window. Your gut is epically wrong at a cosmic scale every day, 100 times a day. So you have to learn to not trust your gut in this situation. Then when you fix the problem, go back to trusting your gut. But when you tell people that, they hate it. What do you mean don't trust your gut? What do you mean don't trust my intuition? My Instagram gurus told me that intuition is right. Like, well, your Instagram guru doesn't have panic disorders. Tell him to shut the fuck up. So,
you're right. Yep.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. So I could rant.
You're good. I got you for about 10 more minutes, so I want to give you an opportunity to tell. I haven't read the books yet. Okay. So tell us a little bit about the books. You have 2 books. And then tell us about anything else you got going on you'd like to plug, any of that stuff.
Sure. Well, there's the podcast. There's the social media community around it. Everything you can find on my website, which is at theanxioustruth.com. So everything is there. And then the books, people were on me to write a book for years. And I was like, I'm writing a book. Like, I'm going to write a book. And then I'm like, all right, I'll write a book. And so I did. I wrote 2. So I started writing 1, which I figured would be this big, like, step-by-step recovery guide on how to solve this problem, these anxiety disorder problems. And then I said, well, I have to write an introduction. I got to tell people my story. And I started writing that quick introduction. And then I discovered really quickly, like, oh, this is its own book. So like I kind of hammered my book editor, like, I got a second book for you. When is that coming out? I'm like, well, we got to do that one first. So I did write 2 books. The first one, you'll find them both on the website. The first one is called An Anxiety Story. That's my story. That one, you can buy it if you want, but the link's on my website. There's a free MP3 download. If you want to download the MP3 and listen to it as an audiobook, it's free. Just go to my website, follow the link to An Anxiety Story, that book. You can get that one free. And if you follow the link to buy it on Smashwords, you can set your own price, which is $0. I don't care. I give that book away. I don't care. And then the second one is called The Anxious Truth, like the podcast. So that's 70,000 words. It's 400 printed pages. That is a step-by-step. I'm going to walk you through where are you now? How did you get here? It's not your fault. This is the real nature of the problem. This is the real nature of the solution. Here's how we make a recovery plan, and here's how we execute it. So that book took a year to write, which I thought it wouldn't, but it did.
No, it makes sense. It's
I'm
a very
crazy proud of that book. It is like, it's a simple plan, but there's a lot of nuances in it. And the more I wrote, the more I was like, wow, I got a lot more to write, man. So Saturday afternoon, sitting in Starbucks pre-pandemic, like,
yeah,
I think it's just 5,000 words I wrote today and didn't put a dent in this thing. So I'm proud of that book, because that book, I set out to create a tool. And what I did is I said, look, I've been talking to a microphone for 5 years about this stuff. Let me actually organize it like a college course in recovery.
Sure.
And I wanted it to be a useful tool. And as it turns out, it is. So I'm proud of that. Yeah. Every day I get people messaging me like the book is helping them. So that makes me feel good. So.
Yeah. The podcasts are doing tremendous things. So now I'm about to order the books.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. The book. So don't buy the first one. That's free. Don't buy that one. Download it. So, which is totally fine. But yeah, it's, in a way, the reason why I wrote the book, and I'm writing another one right now. I have one in the works right now, but, this one's called Lessons from the Panic Zone. It's like everything that I learned having gone through an anxiety disorder and solved that problem. Like, you learn lessons that take you through to other places in life, man, way more than just no more panic. So that's a fun one to write. And that will not be 70,000 words or 400 pages. So it's a little shorter, but I got that one in the works. But yeah, the Anxious Truth it's called. And I'm proud of it. I think it's super
very good. And that's on your website. Is available anywhere else?
Yeah, you can follow. Well, yeah, you can follow all the ways to get it are on my website. So if you go there, the links to Amazon or iTunes or Google Play or Barnes and Noble. I do not believe you can. There are a couple of bookstores out there where you could walk in and find it, but bookstore shelf space is hard to get. So any bookseller that has access to the Ingram catalog, if you like a mom and pop bookshop, just tell them to look for The Anxious Truth. They can order it for. I love when people do that. Support their local people too.
Yes.
It's not just Amazon if possible, but all the links are there. So yeah.
One of the biggest questions I see in the group, and it was actually, I think, my first question too, is when you get into Drew's stuff, where do you start? And on your website, theanxioustruth.com, you actually have a section up there that says new, start here.
Yes.
And that's it. Start with episode 1. That's what that's what I've been telling people.
That'll give you the first, I think it's the first 15 or so episodes. They're old. They're from 2014.
Mm-hmm.
Or they're sitting in the dark in my living room, like at 11 o'clock at night. So I didn't know what it was going to become, but those are the first 15 or so. Those are like the foundation episodes. They will teach you everything that we're talking about. So listen to those 10 or 15 first. They're short. They're like 15, 20 minutes each. You can pound through them in a few days. I know people that literally will stay up all night, listen to all 15 episodes. Once they find it, they'll binge it all night, and then they just binge the whole rest of it. So hopefully it means it's useful, but start there. Definitely. It explains everything. I mean, you could buy the book, but start with the first 15 podcast episodes. Don't buy anything until you listen to the free shit. So yeah, that's the way I see it.
There you go.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I don't know. I think we covered a lot of ground. I mean, it's a big topic. It's a lot to cover and jam into an hour, but I think we did all right.
Yeah, we did good.
I would tell people, if you're listening and you have these problems, first of all, thank you for being so transparent about it. Man.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, that's so super helpful. But if you have these problems and you kind of like what you heard me and Chris talk about, just learn about it, please. Like, go listen to those first podcast episodes, learn about it, and go about it the right way. If this is attractive to you, like, I want to fix this problem, there are things to learn. So hop on over there, join the Facebook group, and all that stuff will get you in. You can listen and learn, and it's important to do it that way. Don't just think you're going to run it over because some goofball from New York told you to.
There you go.
That's it.
That's right. It works, folks. It really is definitely working for me.
Good. Well, I appreciate that, man. I could see it already just in a couple of weeks that you've been hanging around.
Yeah. Drew, thank you so much, man.
You're welcome. I'll come on anytime. I hope it works out for you.
We definitely bug you again. Yeah.
Anytime, brother.
So, everybody, thank you so much. Drew Linsalata from theanxioustruth.com.
Yep.
Check it out.
Yeah, and check it out.
In the future.
See you later.
You've been listening to the Warrior Within podcast. We'll see you next time. If you've got the to return.